Yo, what's up guys? Matt here from TCL Blogger. Thought I would make a video on why do NFT projects fail? What's sort of the reasons why NFT projects go from, 1 ETH or 2 ETH when everyone's sort of hyped about it on Twitter? Why do they kind of drop to 0.05 or 0.1 or sort of die out over time, right? And we'll explore a couple of projects and look at some statistics, but there's a lot of factors that contribute to this sort of thing. And the NFT space, as you guys have probably learned by now, being very connected to crypto, is very susceptible to hype. It's very susceptible to, a drop or a FUD or anything that social media picks up on, whether negative or positive, influences the project extremely heavily. So there's many projects that are out right now. NFTs used to be a very small space back in the day. Now there's probably like 5,000 plus, maybe even 10,000 plus NFT projects out there. And that's what's happened, right? People have sort of found the ones that have had some depth seem to make it at the top of the charts. The ones that have been building consistently for a very long time. So, for example, the Sandbox, you got CryptoPunks, Decentraland. You also have some new ones that seem promising that have been able to stay up there for a while. So, for example, Clone X. We got Mutant Bored Apes, which aren't relatively new. I mean, they were only released this year. We got this one, Wizards and Dragon Game, WND, that came out. So when you look at all these projects, when it comes to failure, I think in this climate what we have is a lot of people jumping in, they buy into a project, and then it sort of dies down, right? So Mechaverse is a really good example of this, where Mechaverse was probably the most hyped project of 2021. And you can see people traded here for 5 ETH, 6 ETH, and even I bought kind of at like 5 or 6 ETH. And it was extremely hyped. So you're already buying it at a point where people know, everyone that sort of wants it already sort of knows about it. So I've already made a purchase into it, right? So what's the sort of momentum from here onwards? Does it grow or does it drop? Well, technically, because there's not enough more people that will come to know about it, that will come in and invest. It will die off if there's no solid momentum for the project. And this happens with a lot of projects, right? In Mechaverse's case, it wasn't that it was a bad project. It was just that it was super hyped at the start. For example, at the end of the day, right now, at this instant, it's worth 1.2 Ethereum. And to be honest, that's pretty much higher than like 80 to 90% of NFT projects out there and their flaws, right? A Mechaverse NFT is still 6,000 US dollars if you want to buy one. That's pretty damn good, especially for a project that's what, 2 months old. So when you put into perspective that when you're buying into something, you kind of also have to assess, along with the founder, along with the team and the community and the idea, you also have to sort of assess what's your timing of entry. Are you entering at a time that it's super hyped, or are you entering at a time that it's super low? For example, Mechaverse right now, if you were to buy into Mechaverse right now and they suddenly announce something really big and it goes up a little bit, then even if you look at this chart, because you bought down here, you would have been doing fine with it, right? So in the short term, NFTs quote unquote fail based on really just social media hype. What's sort of centered around that project? Does that project follow through with that momentum? And that's one of the reasons why influencers also sort of take advantage of this thing, is where they buy a lot at the start and then they bring publicity to the projects to bring it into this hype mode. They sell and it sort of dies out because it can't really sustain that hype, right? And this sort of happens with every single project. There is no project out there today that has not seen a major dip. It's always, no matter how good the project is, even if you look at Bored Ape Yacht Club and you zoom out and you look at the whole, all-time chart graph, you'll see multiple events where it kind of went up a lot. So this one kind of went all the way up to 5.4 ETH average price and dropped to about 3.5, 3.7 average price. So a drop of about 30 to 40%. It did that all the way at the start. It did that here. It did that again over here. 8 ETH all the way down to 6 ETH. It did that here where it went from 24 down to 15 and then it boomed all the way here, 66. It's doing its thing, right? So at here, would you have said that the project failed because there was not much momentum that followed through? at the end of the day, sometimes we're just way too early. So let's kind of zoom out a little bit and we look at somewhat more projects. So Bloot was something that was launched by Beanie and kind of jumped on the hype of Loot, right? So Loot was a project where you could buy these funny text words, or basically text files, but what they were just the metadata where you could build games off of and give these items or these pieces of coding features. So you can say, well, this guy has got a DM black suit loading loop, whatever this may be. And if you look at the sort of properties, then they are generally there, right? And you can kind of build upon that into you can build projects on top of that. So if you zoom out, it kind of was born into hype. It did relatively well. I mean, it did actually very well at the start because of the hype. I mean, it generated till now 9,000 ETH worth of volume, which is what, 35 million dollars worth of secondary trading volume. But just because it was hyped doesn't mean it's a good project, right? If the hype doesn't follow through, or at least the momentum doesn't follow through, then it's going to sort of die a slow death. But here we go. You look at November 21st, it's got, 421 sales that day, and it looks like it's got a little bit more attention than it had during this sort of very slow dead phase. And they're somewhat active with their Twitter. You can see, like, at the start, they're getting quite a lot of engagement, about Bloot, and then it sort of died out. If you look at the kind of current status, they dropped this NFT, and they've dropped a couple of things here on November 24th. The next tweet was December 2nd. So at the end of the day, they are making an effort, and they are somewhat back here to do certain things. But it shows you that if the momentum doesn't follow through, the projects usually die out, or at least go stagnant for a little bit. There is no reason why someone can come back to Bloot and build a great project on top of it. The cool thing about it, if you scroll all the way down here, is there was a pretty big community of people that were just building items for it. They were doing art drops for people that had Bloot. They were doing all sorts of things. So it was kind of like this ticket or access to a community that allowed you to build a lot more projects on it, not just do drops, but also art, etc., etc. So when you kind of zoom out, you kind of look at a graph like Bored Apes, but you also look at certain things like the sandbox, multiple points of where they kind of died out in mainstream attention. I guess what you're trying to look out for is not just a viral moment, is how a project can, through those multiple viral moments, create something that has longevity, right? And they keep building, and they keep having those moments where people suddenly, it hits the spotlight and it suddenly drops in. Or it becomes sort of the number one talked about project in the space. So with Sandbox, you can see here with 2 to 3 years, they were kind of stagnant for a while. And then here they've gone exponential, right? And if you look at the Sandbox, well, you could have seen signs of how this project would not fail, right? They sold lands, which was good, but they were also, at the very start, even since day one, onboarding pretty big partnerships. So they were getting, Pixel or Animoca Brands or Shaun the Sheep, Delta Time. They were getting Formula One, etc. And some pretty big IPs into the map or onto their platform, and they were displaying it in this sort of fashion. So you could see, well, all right, even if they did die out, you could see them continuously building. So you could sort of predict, all right, well, if they keep this momentum up, what is it going to look like in 1 year or 2 year? And the reality is, it would have looked like this. This is exactly what it looks like. It looks like so many brands and companies have bought land in the Sandbox, and that's sort of one of the reasons why it visually depicts this sort of metaverse vibe, right? So you're also sort of predicting that momentum. Will they, at the core level, continue to build? So yeah, projects fail based on your timing of entry, but also because people just don't keep building with them. So that's why social media and Twitter and their Discords and the social channels, their Medium posts, their community as a whole is good to look into, because you really want to know if the momentum will continue beyond just the startup phase. Even on day one, when they launch, within 1 or 2 weeks, expect a die out of prices or a dip in prices. Speculative price action usually dies out after the event happens, but within a month, 2 months, 3 months, they should be able to have consistent output of information so you can make a decision, and you should be able to tell whether that company or project will continue. All right, guys, just some thoughts about why projects fail or NFT projects fail. Hope you learned something, and I'll catch you in another video.